Hi, and welcome to Statistics. We're going to talk a little bit about what this thing statistics is first, and then we'll jump into actually doing some stuff. So first of all, what is statistics? Well, statistics is the science of collecting, organizing, summarizing, and analyzing data, and then, ideally, drawing conclusions based on the data. Now, what's this word data? Well, data are observations, such as measurements, right? You might measure someone's height, measurements, or something like that. Or they could be things like survey responses. Okay, so they're observations, meaning information that you collect in some way, whether by measuring or some other way. Now, you're doing this to study something, and the group of objects you're studying, so the entire group of objects to be studied, is called the population. Now, often you can't study everybody in the entire population, so you instead study a subgroup of the population, and that's called a sample. So a sample is a subcollection of the entire population. So you're studying this population. Typically, you're studying some characteristic of the individuals in the population. In statistics, we call that a variable. So a variable is a characteristic of the individuals in a population. Now, if you measure that characteristic for the entire population, you have something called a parameter. So a parameter is a number or numerical measurement describing a characteristic of a population. If instead you're forced to measure something just for the sample of the population you've got, we call that number or that numerical measurement a statistic. Okay, and that's describing the characteristic of a sample. Now, the way I remember what's the difference between a parameter and a statistic, notice the parameter starts with a P. It measures the population. That also starts with a P. Whereas the statistic is a measurement describing the sample. So see, you've got the P's go together and the S's go together. So parameters are for the population. Statistics are for the sample. Okay, not to be confused with the science of statistics, which refers to the whole process of collecting, organizing, summarizing, and analyzing data, and then drawing conclusions based on the data. Okay, let's look at an example of all this stuff. So suppose you're studying the characteristic car ownership of the student body at your school. And it's known that 37% of the individuals in the student body own a car. Now, as part of your research, you survey 70 students in the cafeteria. And 42% of the students you survey own a car. Let's practice with our vocabulary a little bit. First of all, in this example, what's the population? You're studying car ownership of the student body at your school. So the population is all students at your school. Is there a sample mentioned in this example? Notice that as part of your research, you survey 70 students in the cafeteria. That's a sub-collection of the population of all students at your school, so that is a sample. So yes, the 70 students in the cafeteria is a sample. Now, there's some numbers in the example as well. Besides the 70 students in the sample, we mentioned 37% and 42%. So the question here is, are these parameters or statistics? Now remember, a parameter describes the population, a statistic describes the sample. So let's go up here, let's see that. Where is that 37%? Here it is. 37% of the individuals in the student body. Notice the student body is the population. Okay, we said the student body was the population. And the 37% is describing a characteristic of that population. So the 37% is a parameter. Parameters go with the population. What about the 42%? Let's see, let's go back to the example. The 42%, you got that number by surveying the 70 students in the cafeteria. And remember, we said the 70 students in the cafeteria are a sample. So the 42% is a number that describes the sample. Numbers that describe samples are called statistics. Okay, so 42% is a statistic. Oh, and then let's think about that last number in there, in the example, the 70. What's the 70? Let's see. 70 students in the cafeteria. Now, at first blush, you might say, well, that's a statistic because it has to do with the sample. But notice it's not a number that's describing a characteristic. Remember, we're studying the characteristic or variable car ownership. And 70 doesn't have anything to do with that. What 70 is, it's just telling us how many people are in the sample. In other words, it's the sample size. So it's actually neither. It is the size of the sample. So it's the size of the sample. Okay. Okay, and you'll have a chance to practice with those vocabulary items in a few minutes. In the meantime, we're going to go on and talk a little bit more about types of variables and data. We'll do that in the next video.